the recent recrudescence of something very sinister and very menacing, that is to say, despotism of the old form in Russia, one-party rule, KGB rules, KGB standards for the treatment of dissent, for the treatment of the press, for the treatment of opposition politicians, for the treatment of neighboring countries as far distant as Georgia and Chechnya and Latvia and Lithuania. The return, in other words, of what used to be called Great Russian chauvinism under Putin and Medvedev is accompanied by something that was always the accompaniment of Great Russian Tsarist tyranny and, by the way, Stalinist tyranny before. Over the shoulder of the dictator stands, every time you see it, the black cowled figure of the Russian Orthodox bishop, claiming, as they do now, and as they're freely granted by Putin and Medvedev, exclusive right to be the state church. No other Christian church is allowed even to recruit or proselytize in Russia, let alone a Jewish or Islamic force. Not allowed at all. When Medvedev takes his oath of office as president, he takes it with an archbishop holding an icon up for him to kiss. You may remember that in the very strong field of stupid remarks made by President Bush, probably the stupidest, this is a very competitive selection, was his meeting with Vladimir Putin, where he said, as soon as he saw that he was wearing his grandmother's crucifix, he could look into his eyes and know that he was a sincere and decent man. Doesn't anyone here feel a moan of shame that any American president could make such a statement and be so uncritically received for it? Because to use the word faith is always to use the word as if it was a positive. And see what we've helped to baptize in Russia now, another form of Tsarism, anti-Semitism, chauvinism, police dictatorship, with baptizing it, the Russian Orthodox Church. This is a decision with which we will feel a strong sense of dissent and regret and remorse for many years to come in my submission. And it's impossible to imagine this new form of Russian tyranny without this Christian carapace overlaid upon it. Need I add to an audience as well versed in current affairs as this one that a nightmare that has been obsessing all thinking people for many decades now is about to be upon us. We've all worried and wondered when it would occur. When will it happen that a messianic regime or gang or group will manage to get hold of apocalyptic weaponry? When will the two curves intersect? When will those who think that the end of the world is coming get weaponry that can make that happen? Well, it is about to happen in Iran, in Persia. You can wave all you like, darling, I can't see it. How many minutes is that? 1 minute. I've barely got my trousers off, and she's already calling time. Well, let me not then adumbrate too much. It's going to happen. It has, in fact, almost certainly already occurred. The parties of God intend to confront us with the idea of how we'll feel when we have to live at their pleasure, when we in the United States and our friends and allies in Western and Eastern and Central Europe and Lebanon and the Sunni Arab Gulf and also will have to wonder all the time, what is the pleasure? What is the pleasure of the Iranian theocracy now that it has thermonuclear weapons and the means to deliver them? We will have to factor their desires into our arrangements. We will have to know what it's like to live at their pleasure. And I think if I phrase it like that, I won't need to unsheath from their quiver the rest of my examples. That is why I say in my book, and that's why I say in all my, that the origins of totalitarianism are theocratic, that the original totalitarian temptation, the original totalitarian proposition is that we can refer all our difficulties, all our wishes, all our desires, all our hopes, all our dreads and fears to an unalterable dictatorship, a celestial North Korea in the sky that supervises us from dawn till dusk, that subjects us to constant surveillance while we're asleep, before we are born, after we are dead, and that not until we can get rid of this diseased desire for dictatorship, this hatred of our own freedom, this wish for tyranny in our own heads, do we stand the smallest chance of emancipating ourselves, our children, our allies, our friends, our comrades, and our descendants from the horror, the hell of dictatorship and mass murder in the here and now. I rest my case. Thank you.
It's for me always a much anticipated event to come back to Freedom Fest. I'm delighted to be sharing the podium with Christopher. As usual, his opening statement is very sneaky. Rather than make the argument in the form I anticipated, he kind of has launched the elliptical mode of attack. I'm going to come back to some of the things he spoke about. I want to address the atheist argument, you may say, in its more mainstream form. And in its more mainstream form, the kind that we see in books like God is Not Great, or The God Delusion, The End of Faith, and so on, has essentially been to say that if you look around the world, you see religion as the source of the problem. You got the Islamic crazies over there. You got the Christian nuts over here. What do these groups have in common? Well, they're fueling their fanaticism at the same holy gas station. In other words, religion is the problem. And it doesn't stop there. One of the atheist writers very cleverly described 9/11 as, quote, a faith-based initiative. And you see, I'm following here the principles of the just war. Rather than gouge the opponent, I state his argument very eloquently, even causing my opponents to applaud. Then I gracefully knock them down. Well, to return to the point at hand. The argument goes on. Look around the world. What's the source of tension, conflict, division, violence? The Israelis and the Palestinians are fighting over religion. The Shia and the Sunni in Iraq. The Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland. And history tells the Crusades, the Inquisition, the religious wars, the witch trials. So, the argument goes, a reasonable person would conclude that we'd be a lot better off if we got God out of it, if we had a secular society. It would be a more reasonable, more scientific, more peaceful, more decent society. This is the argument I want to take on. In other words, the new atheism not at its weak point, but in some ways at its strong point. And like a lot of arguments that at the end of the day I want to argue is bogus or specious, it does contain an element of truth. When I speak on the university campus, I often tell students, when you hear an argument that's flawed, always ask, what is the grain of truth in it? Because if it didn't have a grain of truth, no one would believe it. So there is a molecule of truth in what Christopher is arguing. It is true that the Islamic radicals do what they do in the name of God. But here is where the bogus analogies set in. There is an effort here, for example, to equate Islamic radicalism over there with, say, Christianity. Now, first of all, let's ask in a very reasonable way, who is the Christian bin Laden? Where is the Christian Al-Qaeda? Where is the Christian Hamas or Hezbollah? Where is the Christian country today run along the lines of Khomeini's Iran? I don't know if you saw Christian Amanpour's special God's Warriors, which attempted to make this sort of analogy between Islam and Christianity. You know, the first day was Islam, and so we heard about 9/11, the Bali bombing, the London bombing, the Madrid bombing, and so on. But when it came to Christianity, it was something more like this. Here is Christian Amanpour in the hills of Montana. Outside a trailer sits an 80-year-old man in a rocking chair. He wants to blow up the world. He's the Christian bin Laden. True, he doesn't have a dollar to his name, but be very afraid of this guy. So this is what I'm getting at. The crimes of radical Islam could not be reasonably imputed to any other religion, not Hinduism, not Buddhism. But this false equation has enabled the new atheist to get quite a bit of mileage.